somewhat conflicting lesson has been learned concerning troop movements in Chinooks. Troops approaching an LZ in a Chinook must remain seated until the helicopter is firmly on the ground, or a serious accident may result. Premature movement of troops toward the rear door could shift the center of gravity so far that the pilot might not be able to correct for the out-of-balance condition. A particular lesson learned concerning assault landings is that every effort should be made to select LZs on key terrain, especially on high ground. There are two basic reasons for this. First, the enemy's prepared defenses, bunkers, emplacements, trenches, etc., are usually oriented toward the ground below, and landing above him means landing behind him. And second, landing on high LZs enables friendly troops to attack downhill, thus reducing the fatigue factor and increasing their speed of movement. Another lesson learned is that wherever possible, the crew chief must visually check his helicopter after each flight for battle damage. He discovers that this medevac ship has been hit. With the assault landing completed and the troops advancing in the search and destroy operation, the Air Force begins its close support mission. It has been established that close coordination between the ground commander and the Air Force Forward Air Controller is vital. A complex but critical lesson learned in Vietnam is that close combat air support by United States Air Force elements is essential for helicopter assault operations. One way to help achieve this is to cross-train Army Aviation Element Operation Planning Officers and the Air Force Forward Air Controller. They must be trained in the conduct of both the Army and Air Force portions of an air mobile operation as integral parts of one continuous mission, rather than as separate but related components of a single combat operation. As the operation continues, gunships join in providing fire support with rockets, machine guns, grenade launchers, and even the helicopter-mounted 20mm cannon. It has been established that Army helicopter pilots can give exceptionally close and effective support to ground troops. Since many are trained in the combat arms, they have an intimate understanding of the needs of the individual on the ground, and consequently, what support he requires. Working at slow speeds and low altitudes, thoroughly briefed on each individual infantry action, Army helicopter pilots and crews are selective with aimed fire. Helicopter crews are frequently instrumental in helping provide another type of close support, that given by artillery. Greater and greater emphasis is being placed on coordination between air mobile units and conventional artillery units during both training and combat operations. Experience in Vietnam has proved that within 6 weeks, an artillery unit can thoroughly master the techniques and fundamentals of air mobile artillery as part of air assault operations. In connection with this, Army helicopter pilots in Vietnam must be proficient as aerial forward observers in adjusting artillery fires. As the operation continues, helicopters begin their resupply missions. In Vietnam, helicopter delivery is frequently the only practical means of transporting such materiel as ammunition, rations, water, and many types of heavy equipment. Ammunition must often be delivered directly to an artillery firing position, since it is impossible to transport it or other supplies over the rice paddies, jungles, mountains, and other impassable terrain features that dominate South Vietnam. Even with roads available, ground security in guerrilla warfare requires many troops. These mechanical mules will distribute ammunition within the battery base of operations. Many resupply loads must be landed on unusual terrain or in confined areas. The experience and skill of the pilot will determine the amount of supplies and difficulty of the loads he can carry, as well as the LZs to which he can deliver them. Pilot skills can be increased and special techniques developed by continued experience and application. However, adherence to standard helicopter operating procedures must always serve as the basic doctrine. More often than not, resupply and medevac sites will test a pilot's skill to the utmost. You can select LZs for assault landings and, in most instances, resupply, but there is no way of choosing the terrain on which a man is wounded. Experience has also taught that no one is making a greater contribution to general morale than the medevac pilot. The individual soldier, seeing the Army medevac pilot fulfilling his mission no matter what the odds, knows that wherever he may be wounded, he is only minutes away from expert medical care. A lesson learned in association with this is that favorite targets for VC snipers are medevac and resupply helicopters. It is up to the pilot to employ evasive tactics and make maximum use of terrain cover during the approach and takeoff. No matter what the mission, another basic lesson learned is that the level of pilot skill can mean the difference between life and death. It calls for the highest proficiency to land on the large variety of difficult areas in Vietnam. This LZ, covered with high stumps, requires the pilots of these assault ships to hover while the troops offload. Similarly, landing on a small mountain LZ calls for extreme skill. It can mean the difference between this or this. Fortunately, the pilot of this H-13 escaped serious injury. By striking his tail stinger, this pilot almost has a similar accident. Experience has also taught that Army helicopter pilots in Vietnam must be ready to land and take off just about anywhere. These seagoing Army pilots have become proficient in taking off from a flight deck in order to provide security cover for naval patrol boats. Phase 1 of the search and destroy operation is completed, and part of the assault force prepares a new LZ for extraction. Then they prepare to load on helicopters to return to the base camp. Extractions such as this have given birth to a special technique. It has been observed that the VC will launch attacks against an extraction LZ after the main body of troops has been lifted out and only a small rear guard remains. Thus, a valuable lesson learned is that the artillery forward observer with the ground force should be one of the last to leave. This is so he can direct artillery supporting fires to the last possible moment. When returning to the base camp by vehicle, convoy cover may be flown by an armed helicopter. However, a technique developed in Vietnam provides for use of a bird dog to fly observation over the convoy while maintaining radio contact with gunships on call. This reduces excessive, non-selective use of helicopters, which in turn decreases downtime for maintenance. In areas where attacks are most likely, it can be arranged for the armed helicopters to fly cover. When the area opens up, the bird dog can resume cover by observation. In a similar manner, armed helicopters can be kept on standby to assist in airfield defense. Coordinated airfield defense plans should include fires from these gunships, which will take off at the first sign of attack. The search and destroy mission completed, elements of the Air Mobile Company make a reconnaissance to prepare for another assault. A valuable lesson learned in Vietnam is that reconnaissance by an air-ground team can be extremely effective. By means of this technique, a gunship can search out impassable terrain and cover a large area. However, should the pilot suspect that Viet Cong may be hidden in an area screened by dense vegetation, he can communicate with the ground reconnaissance unit. The patrol then makes a ground reconnaissance of the area. Since a reconnaissance unit is usually platoon-sized or smaller, they may be outnumbered should they make contact with an enemy unit or be ambushed. In that event, the gunship can provide covering fire. These then are some of the lessons learned about helicopter operations in Vietnam. Since the Army air mobility concept is new, and since it is the greatest advance in battlefield mobility in centuries, many additional problems are almost certain to appear. But for every problem, there will be a solution, another lesson learned. Heliborn soldiers will continue to use them as valuable tools in gaining the most precious of all military commodities, victory.